The murder of James Byrd Jr., a hate crime that shocked the nation. The murder of James Byrd Jr. in 1998 remains one of the most heinous hate crimes in modern American history. James Byrd Jr., a 49-year-old African-American man from Jasper, Texas, was brutally murdered by 3 white men who were members of a white supremacist group. His death shocked the nation and became a catalyst for changes in hate crime legislation in the United States. James Byrd Jr., a life in Jasper, Texas. James Byrd Jr. was born on May 2, 1949, in Beaumont, Texas, and grew up in Jasper, a small East Texas town with a racially mixed population. Byrd was known as a friendly, outgoing man who had a deep connection to his family and his community. Despite facing the challenges of racism and segregation in his youth, Byrd lived a peaceful life, fathering 3 children and participating actively in his local church choir. On the night of June 7, 1998, Byrd accepted a ride from 3 men while walking home after attending a family gathering. What followed was a horrific act of racial violence that left an indelible mark on America's collective consciousness. The crime, a brutal lynching. The 3 men who picked up James Byrd that night, John William King, Lawrence Russell Brewer, and Sean Allen Berry, were known white supremacists. Instead of taking Byrd home, they drove him to a remote rural road outside of Jasper, where they savagely beat him, spray-painted his face with black paint, and urinated on him. After the beating, they shackled Byrd's ankles to the back of their pickup truck with a logging chain. They then dragged Byrd for over 3 miles along the asphalt road, a method of killing reminiscent of lynchings from the Jim Crow era. Byrd was conscious for much of the ordeal, as evidenced by the fact that he tried to raise his head during the dragging. His body was eventually torn apart by the force, with his right arm and head being severed when he hit a drainage culvert. Byrd's mutilated remains were left in front of an African-American cemetery, and parts of his body were found scattered along the road. The investigation and arrest. James Byrd's body was discovered the next morning by local authorities, who were immediately horrified by the brutality of the crime. Investigators quickly gathered evidence from the scene, including parts of Byrd's body, blood stains, and items belonging to the perpetrators, such as a wrench inscribed with Berry and a cigarette lighter engraved with a Ku Klux Klan symbol. These clues led police to the 3 men, King, Brewer, and Berry. All 3 men had ties to white supremacist groups, and John William King, in particular, had a history of promoting racial violence. Investigators soon determined that King and Brewer had been the masterminds behind the crime, with Berry playing a less active but still complicit role in Byrd's murder. The trials and sentencing. The trial of the 3 men began in 1999 and drew national and international attention due to the racial hatred that motivated the crime. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including forensic analysis that matched the items found at the crime scene to the defendants, as well as testimony from witnesses, who corroborated the events leading up to Byrd's death. John William King was convicted of capital murder in February 1999 and sentenced to death. King had a long history of white supremacist activities and had reportedly wanted to start a race war by killing Byrd. Lawrence Russell Brewer was also convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death in September 1999. Brewer, like King, showed no remorse for his actions. Sean Allen Berry, who claimed he had tried to stop the murder, was convicted of murder but not given the death penalty. Instead, he was sentenced to life in prison. Both King and Brewer were executed, Brewer by lethal injection in 2011 and King in 2019. Impact and legacy. The murder of James Byrd Jr. was widely condemned as a modern-day lynching and drew attention to the persistence of racial hatred in the United States. The brutality of the crime shocked the nation and highlighted the need for stronger hate crime laws. As a direct result of Byrd's murder and the equally tragic killing of Matthew Shepard, a young gay man, Congress passed the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act in 2009. This landmark legislation expanded the definition of hate crimes to include those motivated by a victim's race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. It also gave federal authorities greater power to investigate and prosecute hate crimes when local authorities are unwilling or unable to do so. The Byrd family's fight for justice. James Byrd Jr.'s family has remained active in the fight for racial justice and civil rights. His mother, Stella Byrd, and his sisters, Leuven Harris and Clara Taylor, became vocal advocates for hate crime legislation and worked tirelessly to ensure that their brother's death was not in vain. The Byrd family established the James Byrd Foundation for Racial Healing, which promotes tolerance and racial understanding through educational programs and community initiatives.